Um, let's look at configuring ClickHouse. And so this is kind of the whole purpose of this particular training. Now that you have kind of an understanding of the terminology of ClickHouse. Whoops. So in ClickHouse, we have these settings, and there's thousands of them. I already showed you. There's like 13 or 1400 settings in ClickHouse. They kind of fit into two categories. There's the global settings, the ones that apply to the server. And then there are just settings that, typically apply to the query or the DDL command, whatever it is you're using. And so if you have a server setting, like if you want to set the maximum number of threads or something, or the size of that thread pool that I was talking about, you can do that. That's a server level setting. I'll show you how to do that. You have to create a config file to do that. If you do it at the query level, well, then you do it at the query level. Now you can also do some of those in XML files, but we typically just pass those in at the query level. And the settings are here. Now the docs, they're only going to be so much help. But if I go to the docs and I go down to the very bottom, managing ClickHouse, and we go to the settings pages, like there's so many pages, like the core settings, this isn't all 1,000 of them. And there's a bunch of format settings. And there's something called settings profiles, which I'll show you. And then there's the server settings, which are right here, and there's like 100 some of those. So they're kind of a little bit, not all over the place, because they're all in the same kind of section here in the docs, but they're definitely on different pages. So keep that in mind. Let's just start somewhere simple. Look, I have ClickHouse running. Let me go over here. I have ClickHouse running right here. I got the server running. I'll leave the client running. Go back to that August folder. And you can see that I have this folder called pre-processed configs. And if you look in there, there's a config file. And I'm just going to show you that whole file. I'm just going to cat the whole file. Now, look what it says at the top. Where is it? Right here. It says this file was generated automatically. Don't edit it. It doesn't even make sense to edit this file. That's not the point of this file. This file is a convenience file to show you as the admin of this cluster what the final configuration looked like when your instance started. Not I shouldn't say when it started, because it's dynamic. You can change the config while ClickHouse is running. This is the current state of ClickHouse, and it's only got a couple, half a dozen settings in it. Like, for example, the port is 8123. Here, let's do this. Copy that. Let me show you something. If you want to configure something in ClickHouse, you create a folder called config.d. Now, you're not going to have to create this folder in a production install. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be there. I'm going to put an XML file in here. I'm going to call it my port.xml. And I'm going to change one setting. Now, all your config files look like this. They all start and end with ClickHouse. It's just XML. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the port number. That's just one setting. Now, hope this works. I'm going to save that file. If I go back over here to the settings, over to where my server's running, there's so much output, it's kind of hard to see it. But notice it found that file. I can see it for sure. Yeah, it did though, because I can see right here, it's now listening on port 8888, and it stopped listening on port 8123. That's a dynamic setting. Config.d is dynamic settings. If I go over here to that little play UI that I have, this isn't going to work anymore because it's on 8123. But if I change the port to 8888, voila. There we go. And now my port is, I hope that doesn't mess up later what I'm doing, but I'm sure it's fine. And so that's an example of one of these, global server configuration type settings. And like I said, it's dynamic. If I go back to here and look at the pre-processed configs, you'll see that the port changed here to 8888. But you don't change it here. Changing this file does nothing. So you don't want to do that. Okay. Okay. So that was cool. You can also do that exact little trick, the thing I just showed you. Um, Instead of, the port number, you could have set that as an environment variable. So here I'm saying the max query size is an environment variable. Call it whatever you want. I'm going to use that environment variable inside one of my XML files. This is an example of a profile. So you always have ClickHouse on the outside. Profiles means this is going to be applied to some users, a user. My user is default. Default is your username by default. When you install ClickHouse, you get a default user with no password. So the default user now has a max query size of 10,000, I believe. And by the way, it's underscore max underscore query underscore size. I'm pretty sure there's so many settings. I don't remember all of them. Max query size is not coming up in the search results very well. It is the, yeah, it's not even on the page. Wow, that was terrible. I'll tell you what I do all day long. Whoops. I query Google because Google knows everything. And I go max query size, and you can see it right here. It's the number of bytes. Oh, parsed by the SQL parser. Oh, okay. So it's kind of a weird setting. It's probably nothing you would set for the default user, but that's how you do it. So I just wanted you to see how the environment variables work. There are times when you get multiple files inside there, inside the config.d, and you might be overwriting or removing or replacing it. You can actually remove a setting. The files get processed in alphabetical order. You can have a setting in one file and then remove the setting later on or replace it later on. And that's what those two parameters are for. So just wanted to point that out as well. So replace and remove, be sure to check the docs on those. Those are the settings you put in XML files. This slide are the query level settings that you can set either way. This is very typical to write a query. So I'm querying a file in S3 and I'm changing the CSV delimiter from a comma to a little tilde thing. And I'm saying input format, allow errors number 100. I'm saying process this file with up to 100 errors I'm okay with. And I'm adding some schema inference hints. This is a lovely setting. I use it all the time. It's going to infer these data types wrong. So I'm going to make approved amount be a uint32 and a recommended amount be a uint32. So this is an example of settings at the query level. Now you can also do that before the query. You can set the format delimiter to be a tilde and then run the query down below. That's a session level setting. It only exists for whatever little session, depends on your client and what that'll mean. So we'll see that quite a bit. I think I showed you this, but yes, there's a lot of settings. There's a setting for that. There are so many settings in ClickHouse that it's overwhelming. I don't even want to begin to talk about the settings. I'm just going to use them. When it comes time to use a setting, you might see me put a setting in an XML file a lot of times. So keep that in mind that I'm going to do that quite a bit. So, and then the last topic here when I'm talking about configuring is I do want to talk about users and roles because it's the first thing you'll probably do when you set up your very first instance of ClickHouse. You'll probably create some users and roles. And we use the RBAC approach, role-based access control approach. You create users and roles, and you grant the role has privileges, and you assign a user to a role or multiple roles. So now there's other role policies. You can have a role policy, or you can define something called a settings profile, which I kind of just showed you, but I'll show you it again. And the nice little quota things. I should show you some of these. Now, when it comes to defining users, you can create a folder you can create a users.d folder. And inside users.d, you can put XML files, whatever you call them. Call the files anything you want. They'll all get processed, and those users will get created and put into a users.xml file. And you'll actually see users.xml in the pre-processed configs folder when they all get processed. That's one way to do it. Now, we don't actually recommend that. Now, we actually recommend you just use SQL-based access control. Then you don't have users and passwords sitting around in XML files. And you can't mix the two. Once you start using XML or SQL, you're kind of stuck with one or the other. We just recommend you create users this way. Create a user called ClickHouse admin, identified by password. Now, if you try to do that, I have that command. I think I can just copy and paste it. Yep, right here. Check this out. So I have ClickHouse client right here. Let's create a user. The reason I brought this up is it doesn't work out of the box. And it's kind of telling you, hey, I don't know where to, ClickHouse doesn't know where to store user directories. It doesn't know where to put your users if you're going to create a user called ClickHouse admin. And so what you have to do is, let's go back into config.d, and I'm going to create a file called access.xml, and whoops, ClickHouse. See, this is fun making little config files. Make sure you spell it right. And the setting is access control path. And I'm just going to call it users. It's a lot of typing. Let's hope this works. Control path. A lot of typos I'm making. This will be a small miracle if this works. If that got picked up. Yep, it loaded my config again. Let's try and create a user. I don't know if I have to restart the server or not. I don't think I do. Yeah, I might have to restart the server. Let's try it. That's my only hope. Yeah, I still got the same error again. So, all right, let's restart the server and try it one more time. Ah, look at that. It worked. I created a user called ClickHouse admin. If I go to ClickHouse client and I do the user ClickHouse, I can log in as ClickHouse admin instead of default. And what was my password? I'm gonna be prompted for a password here. My password is password. And now if I say show tables in default, I don't have any tables. Why don't I have any tables? Because that table belonged to the default user, not me, not ClickHouse_admin. I don't have any permissions or roles or anything. So I can't do anything. So, but I should get out of here and go back and log in as the default user. I can give myself some roles. Like I can create a role. I'll create a role called read only. That's just the name of the role. But what I'm going to do is on that role, I'm going to say you can run any selects on a database called MyDB. So, and then I'm going to create a user with a name, password name, Rich, and then I'm going to grant that role to me. And now me, so I am a user. I'm in this role, MyDB read only, and MyDB read only can only read from this database. So there you go. So anyway, that's cool. I don't have a database called MyDB, but I could certainly create one and create a table and so on. But for the sake of time, I'm going to keep going. Hey, questions on that? Any questions on the whole user access? That was just a little thing we had to do for ClickHouse to store all that stuff. I think it created a folder called users, or it should have. Let me go back. Folder. Yeah, I now have a folder called users. Whoops. If I go in there, you can see some hidden SQL. You can see some list files. This is where ClickHouse is going to store all that stuff. So create a quota. Yeah, I think I have it on the slide. Let me see if I did that. Permission. Hey, it's a really good question. Oh, I could have sworn I had that on the slide. I have a settings profile, which is, I guess, very similar. Now, a quota is a little bit different, but here on this slide right here, I created a profile called Rich underscore profile. So that was, something that you would assign to users. And then here I'm saying that Rich only gets a, a maximum memory of 100. Well, the min is 1, max is 150, but the default's 100. And then I get 5 threads. That's my default value of threads. I get at least 2, but never more than 10. So for this user, and then that got assigned to me. So in this case, I'm constraining this user. This user is never going to get more than 150, whatever the unit is for the memory. And then I'll never get more than 10 threads. That's a pretty good throttling, by the way. So I think that data, look, I can create that database. I think if I create a database called MyDB, and then I create a table called mydb.hello, and it's just got, like a couple of values in it. Y is a string. I'm going to leave off the engine equals merge tree because I'm pretty sure that's the default. But look what happens when I don't put a primary key on here. It'll say, this doesn't look right. Like, yeah, it's telling me you got to have an order by or a primary key clause. And so it's really confused. You got to have a primary key for a merge tree table. And so now it works. And so if I insert into mydb dot, what do I call it? Hello. And I put in a couple of rows. I'll just say 1 and hi. And I'll put in, oops, I forgot the word values. Dun, dun, dun. 2 and by. And then I select star from mydb.hello. You can see I got a couple of rows. If I log in as Rich, and the password is password, I can't select star from default.uk price paid. I hope I can't because I'm going to crash my server if I do. Yeah, I don't have enough privileges to do that, but I can read from mydb.hello because I should have permission for that, and I do. So there you go. All right. So that's kind of fun. And in the lab, you're going to do the whole thing. You're going to create a user, create some roles.